Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give it a couple minutes for people to log in, and then we'll get started.
Hi, welcome to today's Connex partner session on succession and the talent bench, innovation technology and best practices. I get the privilege of being your moderator today. My name is Zane Zambalan. I was a former CHRO for Cancer Treatment Centers of America, and we've got a great panel for you today to talk through how we're really thinking about the future of our organizations from a leadership standpoint. So why don't I turn it over to them for introductions? So Dipashri.
Hi, everyone. My name is Deepashri Khare. I go by Deeps, and in my current role, I'm the CHRO for 8th Avenue Food and Provisions. It's a CPG, primarily private label brands company, and we are partially owned by Post Holdings of the cereal fame.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Crook, and I run the Oregon Talent Capability Teams for Intel. It's nice to be here.
And Tom.
Hey everybody, Tom Spar. I am the Vice President of Talent Management and Development. That includes learning and development, OE and OD functions here at the Home Depot. Happy to be here.
Thank you all. Thanks for being here today. So, all right, first question. What best practices has your organization established for identifying high potential leadership skills and building aligned training and development programs to support the growth for those skills? Thomas, why don't we start with you?
Sure, happy to jump in, get us going. We have a pretty rigorous succession planning or talent planning process that starts with the CEO. So on a quarterly basis, we actually meet with the CEO, each of his directs and their directs. And each quarter, we focus deep on a different aspect of human capital management. In the first quarter, we spend time looking at the traditional 9-box, so a performance and potential matrix, to make sure that we've got alignment on who are our top performers and our highest potential leaders. In the second quarter, we actually do an organization review to make sure that we've got the right organizations in place, that they're optimized for efficiency and effectiveness, that we're thinking about new talent capabilities that we need and what we need to do in terms of like cross-functional and enterprise level efforts. In the third quarter, and this speaks directly to the question, that's where we spend our time on succession pipelines. And we use Workday, so we talk about succession plans and succession pools for all officer roles. And in the fourth quarter, we spend our time talking about the environment. That's where we spend time looking at diversity and inclusion, leader behaviors, engagement, and some of those statistics. So all of it is designed to make sure that you've got the right people in the right roles and that you're optimizing their performance. When it comes to identifying high potentials, so we do that twice, in Q1 with a 9-box, and then in Q3 when we talk about who is on the succession plans. And in that Q3 discussion, the discussion goes really deep on what are we doing to develop those folks. And so after all those sessions are done, we're able to compile some themes. And so if there's opportunities to design and build a training program or a training experience that will help several people, we'll do that. Or we'll look outside for opportunities that might help accelerate development for individuals on those pipelines. And in some cases, with some of our multi-incumbent roles that are really critical to the business, like our regional vice presidents that run stores. We've built assessment centers, and we use those earlier in career. So they're not for selection as much as they are for development. So if somebody is identified on a pipeline as 2+ years out, we'll put them through an assessment to give them a more focused development plan that then we can start working on and monitor progress.
The only thing I'll add to that is the 9-box and succession planning we do as well. The nuance I wanted to add is because we have a younger organization, what we've also looked at is how do you look at high potentials, or what is the definition of some of this, which is more aligned to the maturity of the organization or to the function. Because we are 6 years old, and we are in a certain phase of evolution, we are looking for more ready now candidates, for example, because we don't have that leadership bench yet. And so we may revisit some of the definitions based on the maturity of the organization. So we've done that, and we've kind of aligned on what does high potential mean for us. And then the other ad I wanted to put was, for us, the focus has been more on development versus strict career growth. Again, given how young we are in our maturity curve, we've tried to add the element of how are we developing these people versus just planning the next role. So those would be the two kind of points I would like to add.
Yeah. And I'll just pile on. We're on the flip side. So Intel's just turned 56 this week. And we are going through massive shifts in our business and our entire operating model. And so we had to take a step back, although we do all of the sort of the succession planning processes that Tom articulated, very similar. We had to really, really think through what are the future leadership requirements of this company. And so we built a whole new leadership framework with our CEO and the executive team to really unearth the things that need to be super important for us to succeed into the next couple decades, and build our own bespoke assessment associated with those skills. And then we are building all of the development frameworks against that, inclusive of, the type of roles that these leaders need, the paths that they need, the coaching, the actual content, because we've got about 650 execs, and then we've got thousands of seniors and sort of senior directors. And so we had to really be more sort of thoughtful in terms of down inside of the pipeline, because these skills are, it takes a while for us to develop some of these capabilities, and I would say pretty hard to hire places. So that's what we've been up to this past couple quarters, as we just recognize that the kind of things that our executives are being asked to do and the leaders are being tasked to do are really unique to what they've been expected in the past.
So in the current landscape, employees, obviously the last 3 to 5 years have been very challenging. Employees value growth opportunities and transparency more than anything else. At least that's, I think, what some of us have seen and said. What are the key takeaways or guiding principles you've gleaned from your efforts to make your career pathing cleaner or clearer and more aligned with your talent strategy? Stephanie, you just started to allude to that. So why don't I let you, and how do you tie that with employee expectations?
Yeah, I love this question because, you're only as good as the ability to grow your talent, and that talent to be able to learn and adjust. And so I think that the principles of what guide us and what have guided us for many, many years still apply. One of the things that I appreciated about Intel when I started back in 97, so that ages me, is that, Grove always talked about you own your own employability, right? And so it's really important for the systems and the processes inside of the system to support that principle, where employees can come in and navigate their own career trajectory and growth, but they have to be able to have both the ability to do that and the recognition that, we are one Intel. So talent is Intel's talent. So we have a culture where leaders are not expected to hoard talent. They're expected to develop it and let that talent move into other roles. And so we have a pretty rich history on allowing, employees to try on new things. We also, believe that the best development is primarily inside of work, right? And so we create a lot of opportunities through gigs and sabbatical coverages and, rotations. And I also have appreciated that because Intel is so big, it has a lot of different experiences and opportunities for employees. So we've always believed that you can have more than one career at Intel. So all of those principles, if you sort of add up, it has driven so many of HR's investments in allowing employees to move. We don't cap, like you don't have to be in a job a certain, 2 years or 3 years in order to go and do something different. We have, practices and policies associated with sabbaticals. We make sure that learning content is accessible to employees and that employees really can have the type of conversations with their managers to enable them to navigate that career trajectory.
Deep, would you like to add on to that?
Sure. Completely agree with Stephanie. In fact, one of the things that I had in my notes was, career paths are dynamic and not cookie cutter. And I feel like that's the cornerstone of everything that we've sort of tried to build here. One of the things that we've done, I think, effectively is making sure that we are posting jobs internally, but getting everyone an opportunity to at least interview for the role. So we interview all internal candidates who apply for a role, and then we give them feedback at the end of it if they're not successful, right? But we kind of want to have that transparency to say, just because you're internal, and we don't want our preconceived notions about what you can or cannot do to interfere with your applying for the process. So I do think that's another thing that has worked well for us. And the last best practice that I kind of want to highlight, which I think has gone a long way in promoting transparency for us, is that we've built what we are calling as a success profile for our executive leadership team, and which essentially has, it's a template which has questions like, what are the critical experiences in terms of leadership that you need for this role, or what's the kind of industry background, maybe what are some of the personal behaviors that either are helping or hindering. And again, the whole idea is to then create a success profile that we can use very objectively to evaluate candidates and bring about that transparency, even for the highest role. So I think it's common to do it for some of the lower roles, to say what are these skills and competencies, but it's very rare that you sort of see a success profile for an executive team. And I think people have definitely warmed up to that, because then I can look at that and say, here are all the things that I need to add or develop from a expertise or an experiences standpoint that will help me get one step closer. And we've said, yes, this could look different in a different organization. This is specific to the roles at 8th Avenue. But I do think having that transparency on what are we looking for, even at the highest roles in the organization, has helped us.
We love our home improvement analogy. So we don't talk about career ladders as much as we talk about a career lattice. And, lateral moves are a really important part of development and developing your career. And so, as Stephanie said, we encourage leaders to export talent as much as they import it across different functions, because that builds more general management skills. And when you know more about all parts of the business, then certainly that makes you more valuable. And a lot of people think about Home Depot, they think about the stores, but we have a large supply chain organization, an outside selling organization. And so there's lots of different career paths that, it's hard to navigate. And so we've built an inventory of online tools, self-assessments that you can take to identify skills or areas that you need to work on. And in our performance management process, there's a significant part of the discussion and of the forms we use that talk about career interest. And, it's on leaders to really help associates map. We call it the career blueprint, again, home improvement references. But, everybody's got a blueprint that has an interest in growing, and they've got a lot of help, both their leader and perhaps other coaches and mentors that will help as well. And then we are, like a lot of companies, on the journey to move to more of a skills-based way of thinking. And so I think that'll even help us be more exact around skills inventories and do a better job prescribing development related to skills.
Tom, if I take your comment on the career blueprint, and Stephanie on you own your employability, and Deep on, ready now candidates. If you think over the last 10 years, we've been worried about if we had the skills or the leadership capability and trying to grow it, but also interest. So we've had people turning down management jobs. So how are you ensuring that you've got candidates who not only are capable of growing into leadership, but want it? Like, how are you making sure you've got a pipeline for the future?
I'll jump in. I mean, it's a great, we're all smiling because it is a challenge. We kind of have the luxury of about 90% of our jobs are filled from within. And so there is typically more than one person, ready and interested in a role. And we've got a lot of different paths. I think one aspect of it, though, is call it flexibility, right? I mean, I think a lot of times people might not get into a leadership role because the hours aren't going to work for them, or the demands might not be what they're looking for at this point in their personal life. And so understanding those things, being a leader that's talking to your people and understands what their interests are, and being flexible. There's been plenty of times where we've, figured out a way that we could structure a role, or be flexible in terms of hours so that that part of the equation is lessened, especially when it's somebody who, has a lot of runway and a lot of growth opportunities.
Yeah, and I'll say for Intel, our challenge has been where you see somebody who's really highly capable in a technical depth area and is really good at that, right? And then we're like, oh, you're amazing. We should make you a manager. And they don't want to manage, right? So we have like two sort of paths, like so paths to be able to become a fellow, which is at an executive rank, and you're a technical individual contributor, or a path to go into management. Okay. I think that, the path up to the fellow is just more narrow, right? And so employees down young in career have to start making some choices about what do they like, what do they gravitate toward, right? And so where we have had to spend more calories and time is understanding the talent that enjoy both, because our management roles, our leadership and executive roles are also very technical because we're a technical company. And so we have to have the capability of both in those jobs. And so we have to find people that have the proclivity and not, it doesn't feel like it's a burden for them. They actually enjoy it. But they're fewer and far between. And so you almost have to like find them young in career and be able to give them those experiences and grow, but also have another path for people to be able to choose in order to continue growing their career.
The only thing I have to add to that is getting a mix of both. So yes, you have people who are very skilled from a technical standpoint, or in our case, who are very well versed from a business standpoint, but maybe are not there from a leadership standpoint. And you kind of want to up that a little bit. So I think we've had more challenges with that, where we feel like one is better or more grown than the other, and then how do you mix this in a way that you're getting the ideal profile. And one of the things that we've done to help that is we've identified what we are calling as succession pipeline roles beforehand, right? So for most of the critical roles, we've said, okay, so which is the succession role pipeline for you? And it could be more than one role. And where we've not had those, we've tried to create those roles, right? So, for example, our COO role didn't really have a VP operations role. And so we were like, okay, let's create one, because this is one way of making sure people are getting ready. It's also a way of sort of testing waters and saying, hey, do I really want to manage all of operations to be in the CEO role, or am I happier in just the space? And so creating that a little bit of a risk-free succession role pipeline where people can try it out, or some parts of it at least, to say what would that look like, is one of the strategies that we've used.
I'll just add to that, as you were talking, it kind of occurred to me, another strategy we've used is 2 in the box. So we literally like let 2 leaders sort of oversee a function. They have they kind of separate out their core responsibilities, but you give them a chance to be able to see and try on if it's for them. And we do have expectations of our leaders to sort of have T-shaped responsibilities. So the horizontal is the leadership capabilities, but the T is the domain expertise. Because what we found is when there wasn't deep domain expertise in their function, it ended up not translating to great outcomes. So we expect both.
So you're looking for kind of a diverse mindset and mentality. Let me play that into a real diversity question and see where we go with it. So inclusivity, and equity are critical elements in all of this. How are you factoring DEIA strategy into your high potential and succession planning initiatives? And what are the key takeaways, successes or failures from your efforts thus far? Tom, you want to start this one?
Sure, sure. And we're on a journey here, so I would never say that we're great at this. It is work in progress. But we actually spend most of our time focusing on the I in DE&I, the inclusion. And that fits really well with our culture. But it also helps kind of level the playing field for everybody. And so our leaders are held accountable for driving an inclusive culture and driving engagement for everybody. We measure that in our employee surveys that we do twice a year. We get feedback from associates about how they're feeling. You know, if they're feeling part of the team, if they're feeling like their voice is heard. We talk to leaders about how they're feeling as well. And we do things that probably everybody does in talent planning. You know, after all the processes are done, you do the analysis to see where is diversity in your 9-box, in your pipelines. But we are very careful on this front, right? Because if you start to create an environment where you demand, for instance, that there's gender and ethnic diversity on every pipeline, then bad things happen. Obviously, we put names on lists that probably aren't really names that should be on the list yet. Or we put people in harm's way by promoting them when they're not ready. And so we definitely encourage it. And, you know, I'd say we recognize leaders who are actively doing things to develop everybody and give those opportunities to everybody. But we find that when you really, really double down on inclusion and you give everybody kind of a chance to succeed, that starts to kind of make its way through the system. And before you know it, you're feeling pretty good about the choices you have.
I'll agree with you, Tom, on the fact that inclusion is so critical because if you get diverse talent in teams and it's not an inclusive environment, then what's the point, right? So then you're not going to get all the richness of the benefits of diverse thinking and capability. We know that diverse teams drive way more innovation. And so diversity has been something that we've really focused on. Our perspective is that we need to make more of an effort to find the best diverse talent and ensure that we have the greatest way of inclusive hiring as possible. But we integrated into the whole talent life cycle, and we figured out ways and means to ensure that the talent that is diverse is also having the support structures, the mentoring, the sponsorships in order for them to thrive. So we have in the tech market, there's not as many women, technical women, right? So we've had a concerted effort to figure out what it is that women need in order to feel fully included and heard on teams, and that we're really driving the right hiring and ensuring that the panels are, not biased, all of the inclusive hiring practices that are super important. I think that for us, the key is integrating diverse talent pools instead of just one-off, right? And we're integrating all of our systems. At the end of the day, we know that diverse teams are really important, but how do you make sure that they are the most effective? And so inclusion is a value of Intel. And we really tried to strive to help managers understand inclusive practices, right? How do you drive inclusivity in teams and conversations and talent practices? So we've been at it for quite some time. We have clear goals associated with it because we really want to make sure that we are meeting the market, right? And meeting the market expectations. I think that where we have seen struggles is when you don't have enough lower into the pipeline, the talent, to be able to move up into some of these sort of more executive roles. And so we've spent more time down inside of the pipeline, especially in some of the technical areas that are really lacking from a diversity perspective.
Just a couple of points to add to that. In fact, I was just going to share exactly what you started, which is it's important to look at a diverse talent pipeline across the organization, and not because it is more difficult to just say, hey, I'm going to have senior talent that's more diverse, because it's that pool doesn't exist. You have to sort of create it. So being very intentional about creating that at every level in the organization, that's one of the things we've kind of done, flagging it intentionally for development. But then the other piece, and on the flip side of it, is not making it about a numbers game. So I know that we've stayed away from talking about percentage representation either in a leadership team or as part of the succession plan, because in a funny way it does lead its away from inclusion, because you're carving it out almost specifically. And so we've tried to stay away from qualifying and saying these are the numbers we want to hit, but more to say how are we including diverse talent at every section of the leadership pipeline so that we have a healthy pipeline.
Now let's twist it softly from DEIA to multi-generation. So we've got millennials in the workforce. In some cases, we've got Gen Z who are rising into leadership ranks. We've been forced to adjust or reconsider to account for their unique perspectives and preferences. So what are the key takeaways from those for those dealing with a multi-generational talent pipeline? So Deep, why don't we start with you?
Sure. One of the things that we've had to revisit is really the timeline for career growth, right? Which is, faster, more, it's really to say how much time do I need to spend in a particular role to understand it completely, learn from it, and then move on to the next one. So being very clear about here are the things we're expecting you to develop in this role before you can be considered for that big shiny next role that you already have your eyes on is definitely one of the things that we've had. I hinted upon this earlier as well, but one of the things that we've also encountered is the whole leadership maturity piece. So EQ versus just technical capabilities, and a lot of the Gen Z or the millennials that we have, I think, have the functional capabilities in space, but maybe have not had enough leadership experiences to get that leadership maturity. And then how are we using the entire workforce that we have and all our leadership strength to then pair them up maybe and say, how do I get these people to accelerate their learning? So yes, they cannot have all the leadership experiences in a short amount of time, but how can I be intentional about maybe putting them on a team that's struggling from a performance standpoint, or putting them on a team that I know has very diverse viewpoints on how to do things. And so how can I kind of almost fast track their leadership development and have them partner with a mentor? So how am I effectively using all the generations and what they bring to the table in a way that it works for every generation? On the other side of it, I also think that it's important to understand and recognize the contributions that we are having from the multi-generational workforce that are maybe have started their career early on, because I feel like because they are not as almost demanding from a career pathing standpoint, they get or the perception is that I get left behind because I'm not so vocal about it and I'm letting my work speak for itself. So how are we creating leadership dialogue in a way that we are able to consider every generation's preference almost for the way they want to be seen and considered, and not letting just the communication styles of different workforce get in the way of us misunderstanding what their leadership ambitions might be. So we've been very kind of intentional about that. And last but not the least, and I think this is across all generations, is thinking through how do we look at leadership roles in a flexible lens. And what I mean by that is co-location was such an important thing a few years ago, and now COVID has turned that upside down. It's still important, but to what extent? Do all leadership roles need to be co-located? How much time is the optimal time? And I feel this spans just across generation. I don't think it's a one generation piece, but I do think there are preferences that one generation has more over the others. And how are you creatively packaging hybrid work in a way that irrespective of the seniority of the role? I mean, I remember a time when we used to say, hey, if you're a certain level and above, you have to be in office 5 days a week. There's no way you can do that. And I don't think we can say that anymore, right? So really thinking about what hybrid package is the best for different roles and how do we make that work is kind of the whole piece. And I'll just close with saying, so ultimately what it has ended up happening is there is more focus on the development dialogue, right? So the frequency of touch points that we need to have, I think, have shifted because we have all these different generations working with different aptitudes, with different ways of communicating, with different ways of working. And so it's almost more important to over communicate and have those frequency of touch points so that you're engaging them equally.
It's interesting as you were talking, Deep. I I was kind of thinking about the different generations actually have more in common than differences. What I mean by that is all of the generations want to be purpose driven. All of the generations want to have development. All of the generations, right, want to have certain things associated with their choice and how they do their work and being empowered, right? Like there's no differences in that space and place. What we found with the hybrid, and I'm glad that you brought this up, is that those folks who are more senior in the organization that already have their network, they're like, I don't need to come in the office. But people who are young and roll, they're like, I need to start my career. I need to be seen. I need to be coached. Who are the people in the office that I can collaborate with and build my network, you know? And so there's this tension where it's like folks who have been here 10, 15, 20 years are like, I'm good, right? I'll come in once a week. So we really had to rethink like, how do we get people to at least come in a number of days so that the sort of the young in career could get the benefit of the mind share of folks who have been around the block, so to speak. But what we have found is the less we try to differentiate the differences between the talent, the better we are. Because even if you're in your 50s, the biggest reason people leave is because they're not being challenged and they want to learn, right? And it's the same thing with people in their 20s. And so we try not to make even differences associated with people been at the company for a long time and people who are new to the company. The more you end up bifurcating the differences, the worse off the company is, because you're not really fusing the best of both altogether. That's been a hard lesson for Intel to learn.
I totally agree on all counts. The only thing I would add is a lot of our leadership training and coaching. You know, it's always been important as a leader to truly understand each of your employees and get to know them and understand kind of what motivates them, what inspires them, right? And be flexible as a leader. It's like not one size doesn't always fit all. I just think that's amplified with, as you said, Stephanie, all of those things are the same, but they may be prioritized differently based on the person, right? So I might put flexibility on hours above pay, and someone else might be more interested in a job title. But you can't lead that if you don't know that. And so we've just really focused on, again, forget the whole multi-generational. It's always been multi-generational, right? But now more than ever, you really got to understand, what do your associates want out of work? You know, what are their goals? And then how can you adjust to amplify that for each person in a way that's meaningful to them.
So let's talk about what is one of the more prevalent things hitting all of us right now with AI. So, we went from, frothy and excited, 6 months ago to now we're getting into the complexity of it. Do we have the data? Do we have the integrity behind it? To, where opportunistically can we drive? So to what extent are you leveraging data analysis, generative AI, or other innovative tools to support succession initiatives? And how have they enhanced or hindered your efforts? What are the best use cases or, more broadly for emerging technologies in the space? So, Stephanie, I'd love to hear what Intel is doing in there here.
Yeah, like we love AI. So, big fans. I feel like, one of the pieces of HR that's really been frustrating is to really understand the skill sets of the organization and how do you help employees navigate where they want to go in their career. And so we use AI now to auto curate learning recommendations for talent because we have a updated job architecture inside of Workday. People can go in and turn their talent profiles. They immediately have their skills populated against that talent profile. They can add additional skills based off of where they want to go. And then AI helps auto generate learning, right, for them. This is what we recommend you spend your time learning if this is what you want to end up building in terms of skill sets. It's also really helpful to surface jobs and gigs that literally get pushed to people. Like here are all the openings that are associated with these kind of learning experiences that you're interested in. And it's based off of both their skills, but also historical job movement. And then we're also using AI to do deeper data analysis to better understand our talent landscape overall, especially in the technologies that are super important for us to compete in and be successful. And so these maps really help identify the talent risk areas that we've got to kind of lean into a little bit deeper and make sure that the supply, both internally and externally, we're working through in order to make sure that succession planning, is always robust. And so I think for us, we are testing and experimenting right now with AI. There's a lot of use cases for generative AI, especially in the learning space. That's another remit, part of my remit that I own. And just like, it's so cool how you can do nudges and micro learning and so many different things at like a tenth of the time. And it's so much more efficient and actually even more effective using generative AI. So we're trying to like experiment and learn and see like, how we can essentially like drive more real-time learning without driving up more costs inside of my teams.
So completely agree, Stephanie. I've been blown away by what AI can do for learning, and how specific and targeted we can be. So that's an area that we've looked at as well. The other one that we've been experimenting with a little bit is just predictive analytics when it comes to looking at the past data and then coming up with some predictive analytics using AI. And I don't, honestly, we're also in the pilot phase, so I don't think we have any success stories that I can gloat about. But almost looking at what is the retention index, predictive retention index based on a person's profile, and we've tried to kind of look at that. Or the other place where we've used it more efficiently, and this is in a prior organization, not this one. That time AI was really new, but we actually used a chatbot for new hires onboarding for HR policies. And I think that's the perfect use for AI, honestly, because you can literally say, look, this is my 150-page handbook or whatever policies, and just look at this data to answer specific questions. And I think that was definitely something that was used well. And I'm pretty sure there will be legal implications if, say, something goes out of hand. But I do think that's a very cool way of looking at AI, especially the kind of repetitive work that doesn't, nobody likes to do. Nobody likes to answer policy questions, right? And especially when it's all there in the handbook. So using a chat bot to do some of that and have the more repetitive questions out of the way and increasing productivity, I think is the other way we've used it in addition to learning.
Let's take that and twist the generative AI and the AI use and go back to the diversity question with the EIA. How can organizations ensure that you're using generative AI in succession planning to actively promote diversity, equity, and inclusion among future leadership candidates? And Deep, you're nodding, so would you like to start there?
One of the things that I was thinking about when we were looking at the AI piece was how nice would it be to eliminate individual bias completely? And I feel like AI does do that. So if there's a way we can harness AI to just objectively rate or assess profiles, even from a succession standpoint, because so many times we are limited by what experiences we think are needed or what kind of a leadership template almost that we use in our mind to say, oh, this person fits that and this person doesn't fit that. And I think it'll be great to have some kind of an AI tool that'll help us objectively assess or quantify candidates. The other one where and I think Stephanie talked about it earlier as well, which is most, or I think maybe it was you, Tom, but talking about skill-based competency assessments, right? Where again, using AI in a way to help us really objectively assess people. And the one that comes to my mind, again, this is something that I encountered about a couple of years ago, not recently, but it was a tool that we used to evaluate manager effectiveness. And it was actually a third party that we tied up with. But essentially, they used a scenario-based AI tool that kind of helped us profile people on their decision efficiency. So they would get like a situation, they would need to assess what they need to decide on, and then based on their responses, we were able to get an objective score on different areas from a decision-making standpoint. So did they use enough data? Are they using more intuitive? Did they wait for the perfect score? A lot of parameters that they were able to kind of give us back some assessment on. But I thought that was, again, pretty cool. Just to look at using AI to eliminate individual bias was kind of where my head first went. And then a lot of the other downstream implications for what that might mean to diversify and add richness to the succession pipeline.
Very good. Tom, what about Home Depot?
Well, honestly, I'm the one taking notes right now from Stephanie and Deep. Quite honestly, we're in the early days, and I say we're taking a fairly conservative kind of pace on AI in HR. So we're moving fast in areas like generative AI and learning. Absolutely will be a game changer for productivity for us. We're going to experiment with writing job descriptions and policies, things like that, where generative AI can help accelerate. But in every case, we're still in a place where there's lots of human intervention and adult supervision to make sure that we're not making, bad decisions. The skills, moving to skills-based with Workday and Stephanie, I'm going to have to give you a call to learn more, but I think that will definitely crack open a lot more opportunities for us to start using it more actively around analysis and talent analysis. But we're just way behind on the journey. We're in the early part of that.
Very good.
Happy to chat. One of the things that I was always frustrated by as a business HR partner working on the talent plans with the executives that I supported was the amount of time and effort it takes to really understand the talent requirements based off the strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time you were done with that analysis, the business context had changed.
Yeah.
And so I was like, there's got to be a better way. And so the data now and the capabilities inside of the system, what has all of these skills, is insane. And it's connected to their performance data, and it's connected to all these other pieces of data that make it so much easier to do workforce planning. And I think it just unlocks so many capabilities. So that's what excites me. I was also kind of thinking as Deep, you were talking, I feel like we've been using chatbots for quite some time. The backend services are like super effective and efficient. It allows the BHR teams not to have to answer, employee relations questions that can be answered by, the chatbot. But one of the things that we do believe in, we put in principles around AI very early on because we knew that this could just be very disruptive, is that, AI as a tool, it's wonderful, but it's there to support human decision making.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't just use AI, on its own. And that in theory, you could think that AI could be non-biased, but depending on the models and who's writing the models, it still, it can creep in. And so it's just, you just always have to so we sort of use AI from a starting point, and then we apply good human thinking and judgment associated with it.
Yeah, there's always a balance. I completely agree. I don't believe that, it can supersede human intelligence.
Yeah, 100%. And so I think that's where some companies, though, have gotten into a bit of trouble in terms of hiring and how they use AI for hiring, right? So just have to, be we just are trying to make sure that we follow certain principles and we experiment and we ensure that there's also, we're keeping compliant and we're not, doing the wrong thing with all the good intent.
Yeah, I mean, or at least my mantra to my team is how do we leverage AI for learning
for sure.
and development, whether it's learning or assessing or understanding something better or somebody's profile better, never as a gateway for yes or no.
Yeah.
Not to have a funnel. It's more to add to your understanding.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Tom.
I just was going to throw one thing in. I've heard a great comment a couple times now where think of it not as artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence, right? It's there to help the human make the decision.
Love that.
So let's personalize this. And I can even start here in a very quick round. How often are you using ChatGPT or some AI tool for your own personal use? And I will, just from
every week.
Are you? I'm using
every
it
week.
about once a week on my
Yeah.
end. And it was magical on building out a travel itinerary plan for my wife and I, and horrible on advice for parenting my 19-year-old son. So Stephanie, you're every week, maybe daily. Deep, Tom, where are you guys?
Definitely weekly, for sure.
So I feel like I use it more for work than for personal. I believe in the creativity when it comes to the personal side. So I actually haven't used Chat GPT for anything as far as my personal piece is concerned. But that's probably why I'm so inefficient in my in my everyday life. But I will tell you that my son, who's a 17-year-old, uses it extensively for learning again, and not so much for doing his homework because I have controls on that. But I do think for him to parse different kinds of data and sort of say, hey, what's the gist of all of that? How do I get the understanding out of something? He uses it for learning pretty actively. And I was just fascinated by how he could take 10 different articles and then use AI to condense them into, okay, this is what really I need to know out of these 50 pages. So I thought that was interesting.
So I have.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a use case. Just this week, our CPO had her top 100 leaders together, and we had conversations associated with our deepest challenges. And we entered it into Slido, and within 24 hours, I was able to, with AI, be able to, summarize all of the things and get it back to the leadership team and have a conversation about it, right? We're doing quarterly OKRs. You can use AI for that, right? Have AI write your OKRs. There's just so many use cases for your personal, but also in the organization. And I think that the less we're sort of afraid of it, the more we lean into it, the more we realize, oh, I can use it for this and I can use it for that. And it's a pretty exciting time.
Very good. I have one more succession question. When you're looking at your structure and your plans and success profiles or succession planning for the future, are you looking what horizon are you on? Are you looking out 12 months? Are you looking out 2 years, 8 years? Just a curiosity, I think relevant for the audience.
Yeah, we're trying to press towards 3 to 5 year horizon. And if I go back to the quarterly cycle I talked about, that Q2 organization review, that is the place where we talk about talent capabilities that are needed, tied to business goals. And
Yep.
so that begins the discussion and then ultimately becomes an OD project that will result in what kinds of people, what kinds of skill sets do we need in what roles.
Sure. Sounds good. Others?
So we're looking at the 5 year horizon, but I have like a separate section that says accelerators, where we say people who are 5 years, beyond 5 years, what we think have the potential to kind of go into that, say within the next. We've not done any timeline for it. We've just said anyone who's beyond 5 years, but you think is an accelerator for this position. So we've kind of put that out there, just what I was saying earlier, to make sure that we are creating that pipeline across all levels of the organization.
Yeah, we don't go past 5 years. We try to do it within 3, and just by nature of the fact that the business changes so rapidly. And we're trying to get leaders to be more comfortable with ready enough, because it's really frustrating when you see the same names on the pipeline year after year and they still are the same years out, and you're like, what's going on, right? Like, are we just not taking the risk on the talent? So, we've had to kind of rethink, how we apply some of that rubric.
So we're coming to the close of the time. Let me just rapid fire a couple of quick hits that I wrote down. Tom started us out talking about the fundamentals, and Stephanie with you own your employability, which I think is great because we've got a relationship, right? So the company has to provide the right environment, but we need employees who are motivated, engaged, and take ownership behind it. So we got to focus on the environment. Deep talked about success profiles. Tom, career lattices and a blueprint, which talked about flexibility and expansion. Timelines aligned with the balance of capability, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence and the employee expectation, how you find the balance of that. And a couple of the following 2 words came up several times: intentionality, including thoughtful recognition and understanding how employees want to be seen, including across generations. Stephanie commented on how people are more alike than dissimilar. So purpose-driven, want to be developed, choices in how they work and what they do, empowered. So sometimes it's important to differentiate less than more. And then, we talked about understanding motivators, pay, flexibility, title recognition, etc. And then we got into, so we talked about intentionality and then experimentation and the opportunity that presents. And finally, Tom alluded to augmented intelligence rather than artificial. And we all talked about the need to, experiment with it and play with it, but also double check it because it's not quite, perfect just yet. So that was a really quick wrap. But what a great set of comments and input and value for anybody attending. So thank all three of you for your wisdom, your sharing, your experience, and how you're bringing that to life for the audience.
Thanks, Zane.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Zane.
Thank you.